the Volin!
Volin asparagus at 33% off. Silpo Price Week.
Zelensky and the leaders of the coalition of the Resolute have issued an ultimatum to Putin. A complete ceasefire starting as early as Monday. The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv warns of a massive shelling across Ukraine at any moment. Kim Jong-un justifies North Korea's participation in the war against Ukraine. And in Warsaw, pro-Russian activists attacked a film crew, interfered with their work, and shouted anti-Ukrainian slogans. Hello, my name is Julia Kokan, and before we begin, please subscribe to our channel. Like this video if we've caught your interest. Things are about to get intense. Zelensky, the voices of Ukraine, the coalition of the Resolute, demand that Russia begin a complete and unconditional ceasefire for 30 days starting Monday, May 12th.
What did we agree on? Starting Monday, May 12th, a complete and unconditional ceasefire must begin for at least 30 days. We are jointly demanding this from Russia, and we know that the United States of America supports us in this.
According to the president, any attempt to set conditions would indicate an intention to prolong the war and undermine diplomacy.
The ceasefire must be comprehensive, in the air, at sea, and on land. It is entirely possible to ensure monitoring of the ceasefire in coordination with the United States. This is truly realistic.
Zelensky says the ceasefire should last for 30 days to give diplomacy a real chance. During this time, efforts will focus on defining the security, political, and humanitarian foundations of peace. There was also a statement from the French leader, Emmanuel Macron. He stated that monitoring the ceasefire will be carried out mainly by the Americans, but everyone else will also participate. Let me remind you that yesterday on May 10th, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, the Federal Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, and the Prime Ministers of the United Kingdom and Poland, Keir Starmer and Donald Tusk, arrived in the capital of Ukraine for a meeting of the coalition of the Resolute. It is known that after the meeting, Zelensky and the European leaders held a phone conversation with their American counterpart, Donald Trump. This was reported by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha.
Ukraine and all its allies are ready for a complete and unconditional ceasefire on land, in the air and at sea for at least 30 days, starting as early as Monday.
Meanwhile, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, commented on the meeting of the coalition of the willing in Kyiv. Just like that.
What will he do? A typhoid louse with a cocaine-dusted nose if a story comes out that our country can no longer guarantee security. The presence of European leaders who came to Kyiv today. All right, don't twitch, rat. Our army, unlike the Banderite bastards, does not engage in terrorism.
In the event that Putin still does not agree to a 30-day ceasefire starting Monday, the U.S. will put pressure on Russia. This was reported by Keith Kellogg. Well then, let's wait and see how all this Russia will respond. And what do you think? Write to us. A massive air attack on Ukraine at any moment. First, the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv reported a high probability of a large-scale strike in the coming days.
The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv has received information about a potentially significant air attack that could happen at any time over the next few days. As always, the embassy recommends that U.S. citizens be prepared to take shelter immediately in the event of an air raid alert.
Let me remind you that similar warnings from the Americans have already been issued before. On November 19th, on the eve of the strike on Dnipro, when the Russians first used the Orishnik missile on November 21st. Another warning was issued on December 8th, 2024, and then on December 13th there was a massive bombardment. At that time, the Russian Federation launched nearly 100 missiles and 200 drones at Ukraine. Later, a warning signal came from the Donatom Center. Russia is closing the airspace over the training ground. Kapustin Yar, for the period from 6/12 to 4/13, it was from there that the same Oreshnik was launched. So don't panic, but stay as alert as possible. Do not ignore air raid alerts and think in advance about where your nearest shelter is. This is truly important. Zelensky has imposed new sanctions against 58 Russian citizens and 74 companies. The restrictions affected Russian defense enterprises, as well as companies from Iran, Uzbekistan, and Hong Kong. Among them are manufacturers of weapons, equipment, and metalworking machinery. By the way, Ukraine has previously accused China and Iran of supporting Russia's war efforts. And now we have some news. In the near future, Iran plans to supply Russia with FATG-360 short-range ballistic missile launchers. Reuters reports this, citing sources in Western intelligence agencies and a regional official. Now, with the launchers, Russia will be able to increase pressure on Ukraine, experts believe. Analysts claim that the deployment of the FATG-360 could allow Russia to preserve its more advanced missiles, such as the Iskander. For Heinzal, long-range strikes on critically important infrastructure, which will put additional strain on Ukraine's valuable missile defense.
It will be much easier and faster for the Russians to strike high-value targets. For them, the FSE-360, there's no need for much preparation before launch. Their flight time is incredibly short.
Well, what can I say? This has been talked about for a long time, and it was only a matter of time. We hope for a worthy response from our Western partners. Another friend of Putin, Kim Jong-un, has declared North Korea's justified participation in the war against Ukraine. Moreover, he calls it legitimate and well-founded. He claims that all of this is an expression of the sovereign right to support a brotherly nation. Reuters reports this, citing the state central news agency, North Korea. Kim Jong-un also mentioned the so-called Kursk operation and praised the North Korean soldiers who took part in the fighting. He called them, and I quote, heroes, and the highest representatives of the nation's honor. Well, that was obvious. So does that mean they're brotherly nations or what?
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Now, that's some news. The High Representative of the EU and the ministers of EU countries signed a declaration in Lviv expressing their intention to transfer 1 billion euros of profits from frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. The declaration was signed on May 9th. The head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, Denmark's Minister for Business, Morten Bødskov, France's Foreign Minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, and Italy's Deputy Foreign Minister, Edmondo Cirielli.
With this money, the signatories will purchase weapons for the armed forces of Ukraine.
According to him, in total, the European Union will allocate 1.9 billion euros from the income generated by Russian assets to purchase weapons for Ukraine. Wonderful news, don't you agree? Absolute chaos in Warsaw. Russian activists aggressively interfered with the Slava TV film crew. The media reports that it all happened in Warsaw on May 9th. During a protest, Ukrainian and Polish activists were opposing attempts by Russian diplomats to lay flowers at the cemetery of Red Army soldiers and to commemorate the so-called Victory Day. Pro-Russian activists obstructed the work of the Slava TV channel's film crew. This was reported on the channel's website.
Several dozen pro-Russian activists surrounded our film crew even before the live broadcast began. They were shouting anti-Ukrainian and anti-Polish slogans. For example, "Get out the Ukraine." They were spreading Russian narratives. The activists spoke in Russian and Polish.
The police detained one participant who struck with a stick, an activist from the Euromaidan Warsaw initiative when she tried to take away his USSR flag.
The Slava TV editorial team regards the actions of the pro-Russian activists during the May 9th event in Warsaw as anti-Polish and anti-Ukrainian. We call on Polish and Ukrainian political and social leaders to respond to such manifestations of the Kremlin's hybrid aggression in Poland and other EU countries. We also consider the attack on Natalka Volosacka to be an assault on a member of the press and an obstruction of journalistic activity. The incident that occurred near the cemetery memorial, dedicated to Soviet soldiers, was covered on the air by several Polish TV channels, including ADI TVP World, ITI, and IGE TVP Info. The editorial team of Slava TV is consulting with the channel's lawyers regarding further response to the attack on journalist Natalka Volosacka on May 9th in Warsaw.
Well, yet another new low has been reached. Frankly, it's all in the style of Russia and its fans. Are you surprised? Squeal. Budapest is preparing for war. The Hungarian opposition has leaked a conversation with the Minister of Defense. The leader of the Hungarian opposition party TISA, member of the European Parliament Peter Magyar, has published an audio recording in which, allegedly, Hungary's Minister of Defense Krzysztof Szalai Bobrovnicki talks about the country preparing for war. This was reported by the Hungarian outlet Telex. In the recording, dated April 2023, more than a year after the start of the full-scale war, Defense Minister Krzysztof Szalai Bobrovnicki speaks about a decision by the Hungarian government to break with the peaceful mentality and move to the zero phase on the path to war. In addition, The recording discusses the policy of rejuvenating the Hungarian military, the desire to appoint soldiers more loyal to the Orban regime, who are ready to sacrifice their own lives for Tao, the homeland. Mobilization was also mentioned. Finnish member of the European Parliament Mika Aaltola stated that in the event of war, the country would mobilize 1 million people.
Finland and Washington have always had mutual relations, always advocated for joint defense. Finland has always been a friend of the United States. I think this is the main message, and we believe in the sovereignty of nations that take pride in taking care of their own security. Finland has always relied on total defense. We are ready to mobilize the entire population. And in the event of war, we can have 1 million people in our army, while our population is 5.5 million.
Aaltola Peven, I quote, "Finland will be hit harder than anyone else." Do you agree with him? And in the end, an unexpected peace agreement. Today, India and Pakistan agreed to a ceasefire. But it all started off very heated. Pakistan announced the start of a military operation, an unbreakable wall against India. There are reports of casualties. Reuters reports that in the Indian region of Jammu, at least 5 people were killed as a result of shelling from Pakistan. Reuters, citing the country's state television, writes that Pakistan launched a military operation in response to an Indian attack. The Ministry of Defense of Pakistan has released a video confirming the start of Operation Bunyan-ul-Marsus against India. It is also reported that Islamabad has used ballistic missiles against Indian military targets. According to media reports, strikes have been carried out on targets in India. The airfield in the city of Sirsa has been destroyed, the Udhampur Air Force Base has been struck, and the power grids in Jammu and Kashmir have been damaged. Another target of the Pakistani strikes in India was the BrahMos missile storage facility in Beas. In addition, Pakistan carried out a large-scale cyber attack on 70% of India's power grid.
Clash report states that the Pakistani army shelled an Indian military facility in Kurmanian, Punjab state, and also struck the headquarters of one of the Indian brigades, a field supply ammunition depot, an artillery firing position in Dirangyar, and a BrahMos battery position in Nagrota.
Airspace has been closed in Pakistan. Currently, there are no aircraft over the country. Reports are coming in about clashes in the border areas of Kashmir.
Clash report states that Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is convening a meeting of the National Command Authority in Bindi, the government body that oversees control of nuclear weapons.
It has become known that during the day, India and Pakistan agreed to a complete and immediate ceasefire. The United States acted as a mediator in the negotiations. This was personally announced by US President Donald Trump. What do you think? How long will this truce last? That's all for now. Give this video a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Then we'll definitely see each other again.